excited to be here, to see so many familiar faces. From Rome, I was kind of at a loss where I was felt like the 8 o'clock service at First Presbyterian Church. Great sermon in Rotary. 50 years so I'm very happy to be here. Very happy to see so many female faces, although I guess it's hard to topic might be different. Everything has a place. And I'm providing the handout an overall map of Battle Gettysburg, as well as a list of the 50 special schools that I've constructed and delivered numerous times over the past 12 years. And I remember very clearly when my specialty tour on women at Gettysburg was about. What I'm going to share with you now in the next 20 or 25 minutes is a synopsis and a few examples of a tour which I call Women at Gettysburg, at home on the battlefield. My fellow guys have done this tour in my babes and bullet store, and you may hear it in 5 seconds. But as I looked at the website actually for the Rotary Club and the long history, you have something common with the guys at Gettysburg. Next year we will celebrate our 100th anniversary. I guess yours is coming up in 2 years. So that's a confluence of 2 centennials coming up very, very quickly. But I remember very, very clearly when this tour, the idea of this tour, the synopsis of what you're going to do today, takes place. A female guy friend of mine, former operating group nurse, once jokingly, there was a colonel of truth in the joke, talked about the typical Gettysburg tour. By the way, how many in this room have been on a tour of the licensed Gettysburg guy at Gettysburg? I always love preaching with fun. This is nice. So you have some idea what it's about. Well, Sue Morgan quipped one day, she said, the typical Gettysburg tour involved the nuclear American family. Dad wants to be. Dad made my time. Probably Susie at some point during the tour with us. And while that's kind of true, I've done a lot of tours, 1,500 in the last 12 years. Many involved children, and without exception, they've been running before. But near the end of my first year, near the end of the tours, I hope to get a restoring rendition of King's Charge. A young girl, Lexi, 5 years old, spoke to her mother, and her mother said, well, go ask Mr. Baker. And so Lexi ran to me and took my hand and looked up at me. I want you to remember what she said. It's at the end of a 3-hour tour. She said, Mr. Baker, while all these boys were out hurting each other, what did the girls do? And I don't know how to think. And I gave her an answer that was probably too superficial, and determined that day that I would find out more about what the women did. Since women accounted for 15 million, or about 48% of our 1860 population of 31 million Americans, it's important to understand how these women experienced our Civil War. The American Civil War lasted over 4 years, from April of 1861 to about May of 1865. The human cost of our Civil War was absolutely staggering. Measurements, at least 620,000 American soldiers, remember, both sides of America, perished. That's a butcher's bill which exceeds the total for all other American wars combined, from the French Indian Wars of the 17th century up to World War I, World War II, my war, Vietnam, the Gulf Wars, and most recently Iraq and Afghanistan. 58% of these dead soldiers from the north and 42% from the south. However, since there were approximately 2.2 million men in northern blue uniform, and many killed, about 800,000 in Confederate uniforms, the impact of these deaths were much, much more dramatic in the South. About 16% of all northern soldiers would die in the war, and about a third would be either killed or wounded. By contrast, 33% of southern soldiers died, and a whopping 60% killed or wounded. That's a casualty rate of 6 out of 10. And that number is devastatingly high when you realize that 80% of all eligible males in the Confederacy served in the military service. Quite frankly, the South is just exhausted with human resources in 1965. Yeah. So what did these 15 million men do while these 3 million men were out killing each other? Before getting to that, and just some specific examples, it helps to understand how women were idealized in the years immediately before the Civil War. The North offers the ideal of the cult of domesticity. This ideal placed men and women in different spheres of activity. Men outside the home in politics and business, and women at home nurturing children and providing moral values to the family. In this concept, men would be tempted, but women provide a pure home and shelter to which these misbehaving men could return each night. I see some women laughing at the audience, apparently the sun's from the woman played by Susan Sarandon in the most recent version of the Little Women movie, by contrast, the ideal of the lady held sway in the South. Manners and purity is what made a lady, and one of the best examples of that is Melanie Wilkes, the character played by Olivia Hammond in Born for Women. These ladies were educated testimony to converse in polite company and were capable of managing the domestic production of large slavery households. Well, these were the ideas. What was the reality for women in 1869? The reality for women in the North is that they had limited access to education. They could not vote, and they had less than one chance in 20 of escaping from an unsatisfactory or abusive marriage. Many of the young single women, a lot of the immigrants, performed 25% of manufacturing jobs and over 65% of textile jobs, and all under horrible conditions, working at less than one-half wages earned by men working beside them and performing the same job. These Northern women did have some small opportunity to teach. They worked in charities and participated in reform movements for alcoholic temperance, prison reform, and abolition of slavery. But experience gleaned from reform activities helped women lay the foundation of the suffrage movement which began in 1848. The reality for women in the South meant that most slave women managed plantation production, dairy, egg, vegetable production, spinning and weaving, tending to the slave sick rooms and commercials. Less affluent white women in both North and South worked in factories and on small farms. Little footnote here. My sister-in-law gave me a book last weekend, which I haven't read yet. It's called Consecrated Dust. And most people who know the Civil War history understand the Battle of Antietam was fought on September 17, 1862, down near Hagerstown, Maryland. And 20,000 American men become casualties that day. It's the single bloodiest day in American history before or since. Gettysburg was all over the blood, but it was a single day. Gettysburg was 3 days. On that very same day, a place called Pittsburgh Arsenal in downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, women rolling cartridges for the Northern cause experienced an explosion due to such black powder, gunpowder, and 78 women perished and over 100 injured that day. So these are the conditions under which these women worked in these factories. Black women, especially in the South, lived in societies of punishment and burden, refused to validate their marriages or to legitimize their children, and often working to death in both domestic servants and slave labor and field labor. The American Civil War would bring change, sometimes welcome, sometimes brutal change, to all of these women. Now, what were the common elements among these women? First of all, women North and South, for the most part, supported their respective causes. A few women followed, especially in the South over the last year of the war, and starving women, there are numerous examples of this that survived, lied for food, wrote letters to their soldier husbands, begging them to desert and come home and bring a crop out of the fields. You got a sense of this if you saw the movie that they were told about a few years ago. But for the most part, these women supported their respective causes. The Civil War provided middle-class women the opportunity to enter professions previously dominated by men, and again in public service. For instance, women joined benevolent associations like the U.S. Sanitary Commission, the precursor of the American Red Cross. These benevolent groups raised money, purchased medical supplies, and distributed religious publications and soldiers. No woman held top positions in these organizations, but they were very, very active women. Civil War women took over the formerly male-dominated profession of nursing and have done that since. Because of such work went against the Victorian ideas of propriety, these women performed back-breaking labor. They risked danger of infection and endured male hostilities, nursed sick and wounded men back to health, and to ease the suffering of dying men. And we heard the statistics I said earlier. There are hundreds of thousands of sick, wounded, and dying men. Large numbers of women began working for both governments as clerks and secretaries, both professions previously dominated by men. American women, this is important, and not very often realized, Not only as nurses, but occasionally as Matt. The time permits toward the end here. I've got a couple of photographs to show you about. I always have to say this carefully. We should say Civil War women in and out of uniform. But what I meant is Civil War women in civilian clothing and also in military uniforms. I've gotten caught on that. But at least 400 women from the north and the really are not known from the south disguise themselves as soldiers and fought alongside husbands, brothers, uncles, siblings. Why? Perhaps they decided to people, or or because they were simply patriotic, or perhaps they wanted to cast off the chains of femininity and kind of adventure their life. At the front, women also served as camp followers. And while there's normally a negative connotation to the word camp follower, most camp followers were nurses, wives, or teamsters, and officers' wives who accompanied their husbands to war. These women had a sense of family, continuity to the camps, organizing religious activities, and helping raise the general level of hygiene. While women, north and south, experienced the war in many similar ways, southern women experienced the Civil War more directly and more harshly. Consider this. These southern women experienced the direct intrusion of invading armies. The north experienced it only at Gettysburg in south central Pennsylvania and to a lesser extent during the Northern Campaign culminated in Antietam. These southern women suffered physical privation and starvation. They suffered economic dislocation. They felt fear for their persons and the safety of their families. And they were left as a defeated nation which had lost fully 3/4 of its ancestral. Now, before we meet a couple of these women at Gettysburg, and as I was preparing last evening and looking over the website for the Rotary Club here in New York, these are stories, and I hadn't thought of it until last evening, these are stories of spectacular extraordinary service. And this is what this organization has been about in New York for 100 years. I guess it was 1911 it was founded in the United States, if I recall the website correctly. So it's been for over a century. This is a century, over a century. This is what this organization has been about. Before we meet a few of these Gettysburg women, I want to give you a 3-minute crash course in the Battle of Gettysburg. Tom, would you advance the next slide, please? The Battle of Gettysburg is the largest battle of our Civil War. And by the way, for those of you in the eastern end of the hall, you have to take my word for it. There are photographs of the regiment. They're as big as we could think of. Okay? The Battle of Gettysburg occurred July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1863. Our delightful American humorist, Mark Twain, once wrote that there are 3 kinds of lies. There are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics. And there are an awful lot of numbers associated with Gettysburg. If we can mind around just a couple of these numbers early on, we can kind of comprehend this watershed in American event. General Robert Lee is on the right there. Brief footnote that I was born in a military hospital in 1946. And my mother, just long before aneurysm thesis and all this stuff, my mother had been assured by the way she cared me, by her pregnancy photos, that I can only be girl. So she had girl clothes, and a lot of girl names. And she was so disappointed when I was growing more than half a century to overcome that disappointment. But as I'm about to leave a hospital, military hospital, back in tradition of civilians in the military service in our family. Was about to leave the hospital. The nurse was from Virginia, brought me in, and she said, "We can't take this baby home. There was a name on the birth certificate." And my mother said, "I thought it's a man from Virginia, all these female names." I always hadn't thought about that. And the Virginia nurse said, "I'll give him a good Virginia name if you don't like it, you can change it. I didn't know where he did." So I guess I'm destined to do this. Anyway, Lee would lead an army of 75,000 soldiers to Gettysburg, and they came for 2 reasons. They came for shooting, and they came for shopping. Okay? The shopping involved confiscating literally thousands of wagon loads of foodstuffs as they moved through Maryland, Virginia, to send back to war-torn Northern Virginia. The shooting, of course, involved forcing and winning a major battle in the north in the hopes that such a victory on northern soil, Gettysburg is about 7 miles above the Mason-Dixon line, which is the traditional geopolitical border between north and south. The Mason-Dixon gets its name from the Mason-Dixon line. So they wanted to have a final victory there, and they had every reason to hope for victory in Gettysburg, because he came into Gettysburg, he and John, of 75,000 men, came in with an enviable record. They were 9-0-1. They had 9 victories prior to Gettysburg. They had not lost one yet and had a buddy tied in team about 10 months before. As the 95,000 man Northern Army pursued the Lee into southern Pennsylvania, it got a new command. It got left up there. It was George Gordon Meade. He was a very popular general throughout the war, very capable general. He didn't have any presidential aspirations, but he did work because he was born to this thing. He was married to diplomats. But his mission was to keep his army between Lee and Washington, D.C., the Army protection of the capital, and also to bring Lee's army to battle and destroy. Pretty tall order for a guy 2 days in command of an army, not that one back. But of course, he was trying to do it. These 170,000 more, 95 more, 75,000 south, collided in a small south-central Pennsylvania town of Gettysburg. Next slide, please. You all probably this map here, I'll refer to a couple of places here in my final 10 minutes of commentary here. But these armies hammered each other for 3 bloody days. And in the end, the Southern Army retreated, and the Northern Army gave pursuit. Now, one definition. In battle, casualty is somebody who's killed or captured, or those killed or captured or missing. The 2 armies left behind in Gettysburg after 3 years of combat, after 3 days of combat, 51,000 casualties in the town. Wow. There's 2,000 population, but only about 1,000 remaining from the town. Theoretically, every man, woman, and child had to care for 50 corpses of wounded men after that. They had prisoners of war, sisters of mercy, and people helping them, but it was really a time. Think about the numbers. 7,000 men in Devon Field at the end of the day in July 1863. Another 3,000 men died of 150 per day, every day for the next 4.5 months, in 115. 115 field rescue. There were also 10,000 prisoners that were converted to prisoner of war camps, and many of those would not survive. Now, let's talk about a few. In the tour, which I do is a full day to deal with 30. Let's talk about just 5 profiles of these men in Gettysburg, how they dealt with this. I got the word for this in Midwest. We have on our southern border right now, the humanitarian crisis in Texas and other zones of California. Fills up the news. This was a humanitarian crisis in south central Pennsylvania that lasted for months and months after July 1st and 3rd. We're going to meet 3 of them, 2 of the main nurses actually. We're going to meet one famous, not infamous, camp follower, and then 3 women who literally and metaphorically kept the home fire going. Next slide, please. This striking young lady is from Tilden Jane Pierce, Marigold family and friends against Tilly. At the time of the battle, she was 15 years old. This photograph, by the way, was taken in June of the year. She's strikingly modern. Step back there on my mind. She was 15 years old at age, and this photograph was taken a month before the battle of Gettysburg. Her father was a butcher in Gettysburg, and her 2 brothers worked in northern military units. In fact, on July 2nd, she would see her older brother form up in the First Pennsylvania Reserve and marching home on the run. She was not here to stay for 10 days. He would survive the battle, and he would survive the war. Tilly and her older sister were in class at the Beck High School, young lady studying near the center of town when the rebel army arrived on July 26th and came back on July 1st. Now, at the end of the first day of the battle, Tilly's mother decided she had to send her youngest child to a place to sit students. So she sent them to a friend's farm several miles south of Gettysburg. The farm was located in a place called Good Ones. Sending Tilly to the Whitewood farm on the eastern slopes of the hill called Rock was like sending her directly into the fire. During the afternoon of the second day, Little Rock Truck became the most hotly contested spot on the battlefield. Tilly spent the afternoon eating a unique artillery show. I think she's 15 years old. She spent most of the time delivering water to thirsty, food, and dying soldiers. One of the men to whom she served was Major General Lee, the commander of the Northern Army. One of the men she comforted that night as he died was Brigadier General Stephen Lee, the 26-year-old general from New York, who was one of the leaders of the Federal Mountain. We know all this because she has mentioned in numerous dispatches, letters, and journals. But also, 24 years after the battle, Tilly, the wife of Pennsylvania's then Lieutenant Governor, wrote a book which is still available at the bookstore. It's called At Gettysburg, or What a 6 days on and around the White Farm, not knowing whether her brother or family survived the battle, making beef tea and bread, attending to the wounded, and frankly seeing the things that no young woman, no person should ever see. She talks in great detail about the carnage she witnessed. Just one small example of that. She returned late in the evening of July 3rd with buckets of water from the operating theater. The operating theater, by the way, in that home still exists. The current owner, Beth Hoffman, the proper notes, will invite you in, offer you, depending on the season, a tea or lemonade, and pull back the word on the lunch to show you the blessing tour, because her family and living in the operating theaters for hundreds and hundreds of emergency surgeries. Tilly commented upon coming back on one point during the day. The entire picket fence, height and perimeter in the rear of the house was piled high with piles of amputated arms and legs, stacked by foot. It was not until July 7th that Tilly journeyed back to her home, wearing the same dark clothes that she had left home in 6 long days before, and with a new expression etched on her face by the many life and experiences she had over the last couple of days. Her mother did not recognize her. And on the way back to her house, she described what she saw, and she wrote, quote, "The whole landscape had been changed. Though I knew it, I felt as though I had buried some strange and lighted land." And the phrase "strange and lighted land" is the title of the book. Platform died, the art painting, they died, that 51 years ago. But it's a wonderful form of picture kind of the aftermath of the Battle of Gettysburg. Strange and lighted land, powerful. Tilly would marry a student who became a lawyer, who became a judge, who became a lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania. She would move to Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. She'd bear 3 children, one of whom would be instrumental in founding the Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And at 6 years of age, in 1914, she would die on the eve of World War I, a life of extraordinary accomplishment and service. Next slide, please. This rather severe woman is Elizabeth Salome Myers. Known to her friends and family as Sally, she had a pretty prestigious position at 21 years of age. She was the assistant to the principal in Gettysburg. And, her family contributed 15 men to the war. Her father, her only brother, all 5 uncles, 8 first cousins, all served. Half of those men did not return from the war. So you're beginning to get the idea that these, there's a story years ago about a typical American veterans carrying the chicken that provided the that pig is big. And these people in Gettysburg were committed to the Northern cause, and they had numerous family members that suffered as a result. On July 2nd, Sally, you can see her here, and Tom, advance 2 more slides, please. Yes, Sally, another photograph of her. She walked to the Roman Catholic Church, which is still there near her home. She approached a wounded man near the door and asked him, "What can I do with you?" He replied, "Nothing, I'm a wounded soldier, I'm died." Sally took this man, 1100 men, home to her family, and such was the good care they gave these fellow men that 10 of them survived their wounds. Unfortunately, one of the 2 who died was Sergeant Alexander Stewart. And right before his death, he dictated a letter to her to send to his family and to his wife and to his brother who had moved in the previous battle. The following summer, he died on July 6th. The following summer of 1864, Stewart's mother and brother, Henry, now recovered from his wounds, visited Sally to thank her for caring for her loved one and to be treated with them. A romance developed between Sally and brother Henry Stewart. They married in 1867 and moved to Jamestown, Pennsylvania, where Henry became a pastor of the Presbyterian Church, and Sally taught school for 30 years. So many, and I followed their lives after that, so many of these soldiers who have been through the cauldron of combat in Northern Civil War, they're trying to create a world where what they can see will not going to occur, and that's what I would do. Sally died at 79 years of age in 1922. She's buried in Gettysburg's Rotary Cemetery, where I suspect I'll be buried someday. And I have visited her grave. And the message I want you to imagine this. Quote, Salome Myers, widow of Reverend Henry F. Stewart, D Company, 149 Pennsylvania, Boston. 3 dates. Born June 24th, 1842, Sally's birthday. Parted from Henry. September 20, 1868, which was Henry's day of death. Think about it. Remember, that's the best one. And the final day was reunited with him, July 22nd, 1922. And their marriage was officially formed on January 7th. And Henry Stewart is four. Which would be a great place in retirement and practice. So this goes on. Skip the next slide, please, Mom, and go on to that next. Thank you. And one after that. Anybody under 21 years of age, cover their eyes. That's a pretty recent photograph of 1862. This is a photograph of one of the famous campfires in which he was buried in the business. This is Arabella Wharton Griffith Barton. The Wharton, for people around here, you recognize the Wharton School of Finance was founded by the family at the University of Pennsylvania. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these campfires were mostly nurses and wives. And perhaps the most famous among these wives in front was Arabella Wharton Griffith Barton. She was the daughter of a prominent and wealthy New Jersey family who, when her family fell into financial ruin in early childhood, disappeared for almost 2 weeks to take care of the elderly relative. She reappears 20 years later, April 20, 1861, when at 37 years of age, when this photograph was taken, she marries 25-year-old Private Francis Channing Barlow, the night before Private Barlow was shipped out for service in the New York Regiment. And you thought she had run a great program. Frank Barlow, I flip back one, please. Just go back there. Frank Barlow, a very superstitious soldier, he's one of the many extraordinary citizen soldiers to emerge from our Civil War. First in his class at Harvard in 1855, an up-and-coming lawyer and editor when the war broke out. This future founder of the American Bar Association and future Attorney General of the state of New York, the Attorney General who would bring the boss-free political corruption reign to its knees. He started the war as a private. His fighting energy, his determination, his positive taste for fighting would propel him to the rank of 2-star general in a commander division in 2 years. Private 2-star general in 2 years. In the glacial promotion of the pre-war army. Already number 2 in the Special West Point in 1829, ranked from second lieutenant captain to 32 years. This guy went from private to general. The toast in the officer's message on the Civil War was to a bloody war promotion, because they had plenty of love. Arabella mastered her husband step for step in drive, energy, and determination. She was everywhere for fighting during the first 3 years of the war, working as a nurse father. When he was stricken with an antique, she was there nursing back to health. He was severely wounded in Gettysburg. And this story, I'm not going to go into time here, I'll move quickly back. Think about this. As the Southern Army occupied the northern town of Gettysburg on the night of July 1st, 1863, it must have been a very, very scary place. Campfires, bonfires, burning buildings, illuminated landscape that was frequently sparkled by muzzle flashes and city centers fired at anything to move. It was truly a no man's land. But one woman moved among those flickering fires, and Gettysburg citizens observed her that night wrote the following quote. Although refused permission by the Union High Command, Mrs. Barlow, trying to get her husband nursing, Mrs. Barlow, by herself, found her way across hill where the line was very close together. And at daylight July 2nd, she ran from our side to the enemy side, both sides fired upon her as she did. Didn't find her husband for 2 days, nursed him back to health. General Barlow recovered from his Gettysburg wounds. He'd taken a prominent leadership position in all these major issue battles of the Civil War, did the state and national politics leader, and he would have died in 1896, more than 30 years after that event. Unfortunately, Arabella did not do his son. Mrs. Arabella Wharton Griffith Smith died during the Civil War on July 27, 1863, which is about the year of the Battle of Gettysburg. Her death certificate reads, quote, died of fever, contracted while in attendance upon the hospitals of the Army at the front. And one more quick footnote. Barlow had, the guys here now, had strong political aspirations. And the day after she died, a friend of mine who researched history of that before, showed me a letter to her. 3 days later was not. It was the wife of the congressman and the sister of the senator. And he was reminding his mother of his characteristics to take over the freedmen of Europe after the Civil War. 3 pages of his qualifications, and the end of the letter by saying, you love the sign of Word is. P.S. His time sensitive his heart beating character. Next slide, please. And the one after that. There you go. Now, real quickly, Josephine Miller is one of the least known heroes of Gettysburg. Long story short, her home was in the middle of the Fifth Charge. She was asked to leave, but she was baking batch of bread. There were numerous Union soldiers around her. She said, I'll finish this batch, and then I'll go. But more soldiers appeared, and she kept baking bread until she ran out of flour. Soldiers commandeered flour and currants and raisins and surrounding commissary wagons, provided them to her, and she continued baking bread throughout the battle until one of the 80 cannonballs that penetrated her house came through on the afternoon of July 3rd and realized that she had been charged, smashed her stove, finally sent her down to the basement where she would tend wounded with her grandfather. And there were 17 bodies removed from that basement at the end of the battle with her and her grandfather. Josephine's courage really would be forgotten, except for the survivors of the first Massachusetts infantry. In 1886, 23 years of the battle, they held a reunion to dedicate to a monument near Josephine's farm. She had married in Ohio. They sent her a train ticket. She came back. Next slide, please. You can see Josephine here, 23 years older, obviously having consumed copious quantities of the bread. Which she was justified and famous. But she came back, and with the help of these same soldiers, everybody in 14th century home now, they could through their reunion. And every time they had a reunion, the rest of her life, she died at 11, she'd be there. And she was one of the women in Gettysburg who awarded the Colonel, the highest civilian award. Next slide. Pretty young lady is Mary Virginia Wade. She bears a unique and tragic distinction in the history of the Battle of Gettysburg. Jenny Wade, she was called by her family. She was 20 years old at the time of the battle. On the morning of July 3rd, 1863, a stray bullet. She was in her home with her sister, who was just delivered board, preparing to go to bed, and a stray bullet pierced 2 open doors in her young heart, killing her instantly. She was buried in the dirt basement for a few weeks, moved to a local church, and finally, I'm sure a picture of her grave in just a moment, she was moved to a place of special honor in the Rotary Cemetery. Jenny's father was in the local courthouse, which was a sanatorium in those days, but he couldn't have been too popular in Gettysburg, having 2 daughters in Georgia and Virginia. Kind of like having 20 boys in New York and Southern and Sonata. But remember the statistics: 170,000 soldiers, 51,000 casualties, 2,000 civilians. To the best of our knowledge, she is the only civilian who's killed in the battle. One quick footnote about this: her home still exists next to the Holiday Inn in Baltimore Street, South Baltimore Street, Gettysburg. There are 2 holes still in the door. And there is a legend among single women of any age in Gettysburg that if you are single and desirous of being married, if you approach at dawn on New Year's Day the doors of Jenny Wade's house and run your finger in those holes, you will be married before that calendar year is out. Now, a female guy friend of mine, Deborah Buttons, retired recently, Miss Deborah Buttons, and she's the one that told me about this tradition. It's kind of interesting. She was telling me about it. She said, I'd like to hear from Miss Deborah Buttons. And she said, well, I can see the skepticism on your face. It doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means it doesn't work for you yet. One final profile here is the short time. Next slide, please. Thank you. Elizabeth Masters Thorne, I'll show you on the right there, her husband, was born in Germany 30 years before the Battle of Gettysburg. In 1854, she immigrated to the U.S. at Ellis Island, New York. A helpful citizen offered to help her carry her luggage, and she never saw that man her luggage again. So Elizabeth entered the U.S., like my great-grandparents coming from Wales, and perhaps some of yours, with little more than clothes in her bag. 1863 finds Elizabeth living in Gettysburg as the wife and caretaker of Emery Rotary Cemetery, as her husband Peter Matt. He was away in Harper's Ferry fighting from a different battle. She had 3 young sons, 6, 4, and 2 years of age, and was 6 months pregnant with the battle with her 4th child. Her distinctive day house was at the focal point of the Battle of Gettysburg, the scene of very, very heavy combat. Letters and official reports indicate Elizabeth was everywhere in the battle. Baking of pancake supper for 3 Union generals, including General Meade as he arrived at the battlefield, guiding senior Union officers to places from which they could observe the enemy. She pointed out in her memoirs that these officers were careful to themselves and their horses between her and the lines of fire, trying to shield her from them. Cooking meals in the candy room, etc. Elizabeth finally started ready to pour herself a paddle, and she came back on July 2nd. Everything, every usual piece of cloth, every bit of furniture, every item in her house had been taken or destroyed. For the second time in a decade, this woman found herself in America with little more than open fire. Despite her past pregnancy, she and her aging father got the first 100 graves for the soldiers in Gettysburg. In 1865, her questioning husband returned. In November of that year, she gave birth to her first and only girl. Named her Rose Lee Thorpe, in honor of the commander of the Union Army of Gettysburg. And unfortunately, they did over much of our infancy. A few words of summary. The Gettysburg Battlefield is the world's largest outdoor statue of war. For those of you who have been there, for most of you, it includes 30 miles of paved roads that take us over 30 square miles to visit 1,400 markers, tablets, and statues. Many of them erected by the veterans of the 19th and 20th century. There's over 40 statues, but there's only 2 of Civil War women. There's an idealized women representing the spirit of Confederacy and St. Barbara with papers and terrorists, but only 2 represent actual Civil War women. Next slide, please, Ron. And thank you. Only 2 of these statues represent a woman. A marble statue of Jenny Wade stands over her grave. It was erected by her sister Georgia in 1901. An American flag flies 24 hours every day over Mary Junior Wade's grave on the moon. There are only 19 places in the U.S. that have congressional permission to fly an American flag for 24 hours without illumination. 2 of those places are in Evergreen Cemetery of Gettysburg, and both of them fly with grave civilians. One is Jenny Wade, as you can see here, and the other is John Burr, a local hero. I don't have time to tell you a story today, but at 70 years of age, he went out and fought the Iron Brigade, got wounded 3 times. He is buried in the cemetery. Real quick story about that. Buried, he and his wife, Master Hugh Jones, a fellow guy, a friend of mine, Tim Smith, wrote this film about 10 years ago. Lightning struck that big oak tree, killed it. It was shot up the fire. The roots were uprooted, creating 2 more days. Tim Smith was like a leading body. So Tim Smith would be buried next to the man. Bob would be right, and use the secretary for isn't that cool? Now, one final story. The other statue, final slide, please. The other statue of the Civil War stands just inside the archway of Evergreen Cemetery. It was recently erected about the year 2002. It is a 7-foot bronze statue of Elizabeth Thorpe. To me, it's the most emotionally moving statue on the Gettysburg Battlefield. It depicts Elizabeth, obviously in a emancipated pregnancy, leaning on a shovel, with body pushed back, left hand wiping the perspiration-drenched brow. This statue is obviously Elizabeth Thorpe, but her name is not on it. It is dedicated to all Gettysburg and Civil War women who responded to the events into which faith and thrusted. So, the next time a little girl took my hand and asked me what those girls did, I had to get an answer. They did what women have done throughout American and indeed throughout human history. They applied their time and talents, their skills and their courage to make better the circumstances